Let me introduce you two more operators, exist operator, not exist operator. We'll see how they works. Generally, we use this exist operator, not exist operator with one concept called correlated nested query. First of all, I will tell you what is correlated nested query. Example, you have a query like this, nested query. So in nested query, you will see outer query, right? So in this outer query, we'll have inner query, right? So which is nothing but nested query, we know that. So in this inner query, if you use outer query's variable, example in outer query you used a table called sailor, okay, sailor s. If that table name, if you use here without again creating a new table, that means this s if you use here like s dot name something, then we say that this is correlated nested query. So we'll see how to evaluate such queries also. Okay, so that is what I'm going to teach. After that, we'll see how exist and not exist operator can be used with combination of this correlated nested query. So let's begin with that. So whenever you have exist operator or not exist operator from now onwards, the syntax will be like this, where exist or not exist followed by subquery. Please recall in and not in operators. When there was in operator and not in operators, so your idea was like this, column value, correct, and after that in subquery, otherwise not in subquery, otherwise operator any, operator all. For all these things, for in, not in, any, all, so the idea was like this, where column value and this operator followed by subquery. But when you have exist and not exist operator, there is no column value, so we don't write column value, directly we write where exists subquery. So column value is missing. So that is the concept of exist and not exist operator. When you have exist operator, not exist operator, how such query will be evaluated is one important thing you should learn. For that, I directly take one question, I mean a query, and I will explain you how this kind of queries will be evaluated. Okay, here I am teaching you how exist operator works. So it is quite obvious. First of all, step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. The entire beauty is how this where condition will be evaluated. That's it. So now let's begin with exist operators evaluation. So this exist operator depends on this query's output. So finally, that is obvious, right? So if you have in operator, not in operator also, they depend on this subquery. But especially I want to know whether this subquery's result is empty, because it's a table, right? It is empty or non-empty. Based on that, so this truth value of this where condition is going to be depending. That's why, so let's check whether this subquery is empty or non-empty. That is one thing. Second thing, just read this query, you understand. Select star from reserves R, where R dot BID equal to 007. Here R means this one, and R dot SID equal to S dot SID. But what is S here? That is what. So here we are using a variable which is not part of this query. The variables which are part of this query is only R, correct? Then S is coming from outer query. That's why this is called correlated nested query. This entire concept is correlated nested query. When you have correlated nested query, how to evaluate it, I will tell you, and how this exist operator will be evaluated. First of all, we'll see how when this exist operator will become true. That means where exist of dash is true. You should know that, correct? So remember one thing. Somehow, I will tell you how to evaluate, but somehow this query will be evaluated. This query's result is empty, otherwise non-empty. Okay, let's say empty, case number 1, second one non-empty. Now, if you have exist operator and the result is empty, then we say exists of empty. So write here like this, exists of empty is actually false. That means truth value of exist of empty from now onwards false. Whenever I use exist operator and the result is non-empty, so exist of non-empty table is true. So finally it's all about whether this query's result is empty or non-empty. But sir, you are using a variable s from outside, right? Then how can we say whether this query's result is empty or non-empty, and how to say that? I will tell you. For that, what we do is we go to outer table first. Forget about everything and blindly start evaluating this query. For me, this is one simple query. take a table sailors and evaluate where condition, and whenever where condition is evaluated to true, then print the output. That's it. That is what a simple model. Let's continue with that model. For easy understanding, I am taking some example tuples like this. Let's take three sailors. So sailor id 1 and sailor name. Of course we don't require name, but just for association to remember the things easily, we are taking the names. So let's say sid1, sid2, sid3. Let's say there are three sailors. They are nothing but a comma b comma c. How this query will be evaluated? Take every sailor. Tuple number 1 will be taken, where condition will be evaluated. Tuple number 2 will be taken, where condition will be evaluated, so on. We know that, correct? So let's evaluate this entire query for tuple number 1. If you understand for tuple number 1, in the same way you can understand for tuple 2, tuple 3. That's why let's fix the tuple number 1. Now the question is print s.sid. It depends on where condition. Really where condition is satisfied, then s.sid1 will be printed. Now our dilemma is whether 1 is printed or not. For that, let's evaluate where condition. Exists of. But this where condition depends on exists. Exists depends on, see, exists of non-empty is true. For that, this result should be non-empty. Correct? But I don't know whether it is non-empty or not. Let's evaluate it. So, but sir, here s.sid is what? Since you are evaluating the first tuple, then first that tuple, this entire query will take s.sid as first tuples s.sid. So for I can replace this s.sid with 1. When you do that, this query will become constant query. That means it is not depending on anything from outside, correct? So read it now. Select start from reserves R, where r.bid equal to 007 and s.sid equal to 1. So for again easy understanding, I imagine that I have a table reserves. Okay, let's only focus on tuples where r.sid 1, because the to be selected tuples here, where condition will be evaluated to true only when r.bid equal to 007 and r.sid equal to 1. Imagine there are lot of tuples, but when this condition will be true, for that r.bid should be 007. Let's say this is bid field, this is let's say sid field. Okay, r.bid equal to 007 and r.sid equal to 1. You have this kind of entry in reserves, then only where condition will be evaluated to true. What is our target? My target is I want to get here non-empty result, because exists of non-empty is true and this where condition will be evaluated to true, correct? So finally I can say that if you don't know the reservations, still I can say that if you have this kind of reservations, what kind of reservations? Where r.bid is 007, r.sid equal to 1, such tuples exist, then this query's result will be non-empty. First of all, assume that let's say such kind of tuples exist. For that, our 1, which is now currently we are discussing, so 1 is nothing but a sailor A. So if he reserves a boat 007, then only this query's result will become non-empty, correct? Remember it. I will tell you what is the reason for checking for non-emptiness. Go back and start here. From the sailors, we have taken the first tuple. Now we are evaluating where condition, where exists of. When I substituted s.sid here, then this query's result was non-empty, then exists of non-empty, true, then where condition is evaluated to true. So now entire evaluation of first tuple is over, and what will be printed? s.sid 1 will be printed. You tell me when 1 will be printed. To print 1, this result should be non-empty. To get result non-empty here, there should be one tuple like this, at least one tuple. You can have multiple like this. One more 007 and 1 is possible. Then still this result will be non-empty. So for non-emptiness, at least one such tuple should exist. Then if you go with meaning, then easily we can understand that person 1 should reserve 007. That's it. Now second time, we take the second tuple and s.sid will become 2. Here it was s.sid, right? This will become 2, and we evaluate this query again. And again my target is I should get non-empty result. Then only exist of non-empty will become true. To have non-empty result here, that too you should have an entry called 007 and 2. See, r.bid is 007 and r.sid 2. Such entry if exist, then this result will become non-empty. Remember one thing, Here the result of this query should be non-empty. At least one tuple you should see. So you tell me when this query's result will be non-empty, when r.sid is 2, when r.sid is 2, r.bid 007, definitely your reservation should contain this kind of entry 007 and 2, right? So you can have so many like 007 again 2, 007 2, doesn't matter. Sir, should I evaluate for every tuple? No. Finally, you should check whether this query's result is empty or non-empty. Ask yourself, not more than that. Okay. So now here 2 comma b will be printed. That means 2 will be printed if 2 reserves 007. Now I can say that it is printing all the sailors who reserved at least one board 007. That's it. Okay. So this is in this one what I did is I explained you how exist operator works. Second thing I explained you, so what is correlated nested query? When you have correlated nested query, how it will be evaluated, right? Now we'll see one more query and we'll try to understand it. Now we'll see not exist operator and related query. So the structure will be like this. We write not exist followed by subquery. That subquery's result is either empty or non-empty. What if that subquery's result is empty? Then we will be writing like this, no, where condition, right? So where not exists of empty. If not exists of empty is evaluated to true, because exists of empty is false, right? So it is quite opposite. So where not exists of empty, from now onwards you remember true. Second one, not exists of not empty is false. It is like asking this question. There is a house. Okay. This subquery's result is, let's say, house. Tuples are nothing but people. It's like asking not exist means, so no one is there. It's like no one is there, right? Is the question. You want to say that no one is there. When already someone is there, if you say no one is there, right? If you ask that question, then answer is false, right? So you are right. Sorry, you are wrong. Similarly, when already table is subquery's result is non-empty, that means there are some people already. Then you are asking this question, not exist, right? They exist. So not exist of, that's why non-empty is false. If there is no one, now see, ask this question, no one is there, right? Not exist, right? Yes, not exist. That's why not exist of empty is true. So you remember this idea and try to understand this query. So I have written a query here. Select sailor names from sailors where not exists of select star from reserves are where r.bid equals 007 and r.sid equal to s.sid. This is again correlated nested query. Sir, why are we writing correlated nested query, especially with exist and not exist operators? Especially, this correlated nested queries will become powerful if you write with exist and not exist operator. So when there is exist and not exist operator, we can write non-correlated nested queries also. But that queries will not be so meaningful. Otherwise, they are not so expressive. Because of that, you can't do very difficult tasks. Here you see, because of this correlated nested query, this not exist operator is going to do something. We'll see that. Okay. Now, we know one thing. Whenever you have a query, step number 1 is this one, right? Step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. Since to evaluate where condition we require this query's result, that's why we have to evaluate this one. I have taken two tables. One is sailors, second one reserves. Let me blindly execute this program. Start. Line number 1. First tuple number 1 will be taken. Our target is Raju to be printed or not, correct? Raju is printed only if this query will be, this where condition is satisfied. For that, remember one thing, we have to evaluate this query. Select star from reserves R where r.bid, where is the outer query variable? This one, right? So s.sid equal to 1. Let's substitute that. Now this will become constant query which will not depend on that outer query. See, select star from reservations where r.bid is 007 and r.sid equal to s.sid. Forget about your past, what you did. This is a query, you blindly execute it. Whenever there is a query, how to evaluate it? Take every tuple from reservation 1, 2, 3. So my target is just executing this query. Take every tuple and execute it. Take the first tuple. Okay. So now tuple number 1. So tuple number 1 is what? 1007. Substitute here. Where r.bid is 007. Yes. And r.sid 1. Correct. So what happens? This where condition will become true. this tuple will be selected. Sir, should I stop and should I go up? No. We have to evaluate this query. Completely we have to evaluate. For that only one tuple is evaluated. Evaluate this query now, this tuple. So now we are at, let me put pointer like this. See, we are executing this tuple. So where r dot bid now 007, correct, but r dot sid is 1, no, it is 2, 2 equal to 1, false, then this condition is false, this tuple will be rejected. Okay, still we are part of this query evaluation, correct. Now take the third, since again values are 2007, this query tuple also will fail the condition. Now come to 3008, since r dot sid is not 1, this will become false, false and anything is false, so this where condition will be false. Finally, one time where condition is true, all three times condition is false. But overall the question, did we evaluated all this entire query? Yes. So we got the finally output. So that output is important. Once you evaluate for every reservation tuple, then only stop it. Some students what they do is they select, they started here and they execute this for only one tuple. Don't do that. Really speaking, we should see the output of this entire query. Okay. So now after that we can go for shortcuts. First understand the main method. The main method is, what is this query? We just evaluated. What is the output of this query? The output is star, right? Star means all the columns. The to selected tuples, all the columns we have to print 1, 007 someday. Now the question, this where condition is evaluated to true only now when non-empty, I mean where of, see, not exists of empty is true. Here we got what result, non-empty. Remember it. When I substituted s dot sid equal to 1, the result is non-empty. That's it. Okay. So not exists of non-empty is what? False, right? So where condition, this where condition is false now, then reject this tuple. So far we evaluated for the first tuple. Now take the second tuple and do the entire process. What is that? Take s dot sid2 and blindly evaluate this query. Start. Let me do that again. Select star from reservations where r dot bid is 007, r dot sid equal to 2. Only when these two conditions are satisfied, only such tuple should be selected. If I do that, let's begin. Yeah, take every reservation. R dot sid 2, no, wrong. Second, r dot sid 2, yes. R dot bid is 007, yes, selected. Similarly, r dot sid is 2, r dot bid is 007, selected. I am evaluating this query. After that 3008, so condition will become false. So output will be here. I can say 1, 007. Sir, why are you writing total tuple? See, star. Star means total tuple should be printed. So 1007, sorry, it is 2007 and 2007 again, someday, whatever. Now stop it. So we evaluated this entire query. What is the output? Empty or non-empty? So we don't require the information from it. We require only one thing. Whether the result of this query when I substituted s dot sid 2, this one is empty or non-empty. Non-empty. Non-empty means there are at least one tuple. So non-empty. Not exists of not empty. We know that false, right? So that's why T2 also will be rejected. So far we evaluated our query for two Taylor tuples, 1, 2. Now go to third one. Again, question is whether Rakesh is printed or not. For that we have to substitute s dot sid equal to 3 and evaluate this entire query. Select star from reservations where r dot bid is 007, r dot sid equal to 3. So which tuple will be satisfied this condition? No, this one, because here s dot sid I want what? Equal to r dot sid, but r dot sid is 1, but I want 3. So condition false. So next condition false. Condition false. See the last one. R dot sid equal to 3. Correct. Condition. This condition is true. And r dot bid is 007. But this condition is false. So eventually, so this tuple also violated this condition. Now what happens? No one will be selected. So this query's result I am asking, empty or non-empty? Empty. That's it. Now go back. We are evaluating tuple number 3. When I substituted the tuple number 3 SID here, this query's result is empty. So not exists of empty, if you see already I told you true. So first time this where condition is evaluated now. So because this where depends on this query's output. So where not exists of empty is true, then this tuple will be selected and the corresponding name will be printed. Then only Rakesh will be printed. The reason, when Rakesh SID is substituted here, this query's result is empty. That is what I want. So finally, you tell me what is the property of Rakesh? Why Rakesh is selected but not Raju and Rani? Because so here when I substituted Rakesh ID and always this condition become false. Why this condition is always false? Either r dot bid is not 007 or r dot sid equal 3. So I will tell you one thing. It is easy to ask yourself when this will be non-empty, because we know that whenever the result of this query is empty, we are going to print the Rakesh name, correct or not? So first of all, think about non-emptiness. When you substitute someone's SID here, when this query's result will be non-empty, example for Raju, Rani, it become non-empty, right? What was the reason? Because when you substituted s.sid 1 at that time, what happened is, so at least one tuple satisfied this condition. That means this query's result is non-empty. For that, this where condition is evaluated at least one time true. We'll see when that will happen. Really this where condition is evaluated to true at least one time, then r dot bid will become 007. Remember, r dot bid equal to 007 and r dot sid equal to 1. I am talking about Raju. Okay, then r dot sid equal to 1. So this kind of tuple really exists. Then definitely where condition will be satisfied at least once and this result will become non-empty. So not exist of non-empty will become false. Such candidates will be rejected. Raju will be rejected if Raju reserves, indirectly Raju reserves 007. Remember, if anyone reserves 007, then when their turn comes, then this output of this table will become non-empty and such tuples will not be printed. But Rakesh is lucky because Rakesh did not reserve 007, so this query's result was always empty. That means this all times this where condition was false. That was the reason for this emptiness. So from now onwards we don't do this kind of rigorous analysis. What we do is we ask here, what is our target? To print Rakesh name, this result should be empty. So we ask ourselves when this query's result will become empty. That's it. Ask yourself emptiness and non-emptiness questions rather than taking the examples and solving. Just for completeness and to explain you internally what happens, like how query is evaluated, I use this model. But later on, from now onwards, what I do is I just ask some questions here, like when this query's result is empty, when this, because that is what I want enough, right? Not exist of empty is true. That's why I ask like this. This query's result is empty. Then what is the condition? For that, the person which you are printing, he should not reserve any board 007. So slowly using the reasoning, I will understand that things. It comes by practice. Okay. So we do one thing. We take one or two examples like this, and we try to solve this problem by asking whether result is empty or non-empty questions rather than this rigorous way. Okay. Now we'll try to evaluate this query using conceptual evaluation. That means with high level idea rather than creating the tables and going tuple wise. It takes lot of time. In GATE exam you don't get lot of time, right? So within 2 minutes we should solve. That's why the best model is using this conceptual idea. What I do is, first of all, I understand that this query will be evaluated like this: step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. Take every sailor, but I take only first tuple. If I understand the query for first tuple, then we can understand for other tuples also. That's why let me take the tuple number 1. In tuple number 1, let's say that SID is 1. Let's say his name is Raju and his rating, let's say 9 something. Now such tuple is printed or not, it depends on where condition. Where not exists, not exists of dash is true, empty. So this query's result should be empty. That is what my target. Then I ask myself when this query's result will become empty. For that you should understand this query. What is this? Let's understand it. So let's read it. Select star from sailors T where, so I missed where here. Please add where T dot rating greater than S dot rating. So what is T dot rating? It's again one more sailor tuple, right? So take a sailor table this time. sailors T. Yeah. So this query will be evaluated. You tell me when we get empty result. This query gives output only because of this where condition. If every time where is false, let's imagine that situation. Don't think anything. If every time this where is false, what happens? No tuple from sailors is selected here, then the result will become empty. That's why my target finally, always try to ensure that this where condition is false. Then imagine such scenario. So in what scenario, because what is T here? One of the sailor, correct? So you are evaluating this query for every sailor. Whatever the sailor you substitute here, T dot rating, the T dot rating should be greater than S dot rating. That condition should be always false. Example, what is S dot rating for us? 9, right? Let me substitute. After substituting S dot rating 9, our Raju's rating, every time T dot rating should be, should not be greater than 9. That means others rating should be like this, 8, 7, 6. Sir, there is a person whose rating, let's say 10. If it happens in your sailors, what happens? Because we are iterating over every sailor, because we are going to evaluate this query for every sailor, then eventually for one tuple, while evaluating one tuple, T dot rating value will become 10, because you said one sailor has rating 10. If it happens, then 10 greater than 9 will become what? True. Such tuple exists, then this where condition will become true at least one time. So this query's result will become non-empty. Then Raju will not be printed. So the necessary condition for Raju's printing is Raju will be in the output only when this kind of value does not exist in the sailor table. That is what I realized, right? Now, if you ask me why 10 should not be there? If 10 is there, then when you are substituting, because we are evaluating this query by every tuple, then when you substitute T dot rating 10, for that tuple 10 greater than 9 will become true, correct? Then this query's result will become non-empty. Then not exist of non-empty will become false. Then Raju will not be printed. That's why there should not be a rating like 10 or 11 or 12 or anything. Then all the ratings should be like this, 6 or 7 or 8. But 9 is also possible, because 9 greater than 9 also false. But 10 should not exist. If there is no 10, then 9 can be highest rating, isn't it? So finally Raju's rating should be highest, then only it will be printed. So here we are finally printing a person's name whose rating is highest. That's it. So here we are using conceptual evaluation strategy. We asked ourselves when this result will be empty. So we get here empty result only if every sailor's rating is not greater than 9. No sailor's rating is greater than 9. Then only where condition will become always false and you get empty result here. That's it. Okay, let's see one more example and we try to understand this using conceptual evaluation. Select star from sailors where exists of select star from sailors T where T dot rating greater than S dot rating. Again, it's a correlated nested query, right? So we evaluate this query for every tuple of this outer query. So in outer query we have sailors. Let's take tuple number 1 who is nothing but a random sailor. So let's say ID 1, let's say name Raju and some other details, right? And let's take rating as something 7. Now whether this Raju or star means what? Print all the information like 1 comma Raju comma rating 7 and age 25, everything. So this entire thing should be printed. But before that where condition should be evaluated to true. Ask yourself, when where condition is evaluated to true in the presence of exists operator. Exists of dash is true. Exists of empty is false. Exists of non-empty is true. So here problem is reduced to when will we get non-empty result here. It's very easy. To get non-empty result, this where condition should be evaluated to true at least once. So try to understand. Forget about that query. Finally, our target is printing all the information about Raju. But before that, where should be evaluated to true? In this query, so because we are processing Raju's tuple, Raju's rating is 7. So S dot rating will become 7. Now this query is like this. Select star from sailors T. So take a sailor table T. Iterate over all the sailors where T dot rating greater than 7. I want non-empty result. To get non-empty result, this is the reason. this where should be evaluated to true at least once. Example, let's say where condition is evaluated to true for one Sailor tuple T. Example, tell me one Sailor tuple T where T dot rating greater than 7. So example, let's say rating value is 8, T dot rating 8. Sir, why are you evaluating for this tuple, not for first tuple? Because we have to evaluate for every tuple. Try to understand. Already I told you, whenever you have a query, and what is the table we are targeting here? T table, sailors. So then every sailor tuple will be processed here. But for randomness, I am taking some random tuple T, and T dot rating greater than 7 will be true when the rating is 8. Just we are feeling, otherwise we are imagining a data where this where condition is evaluated to true at least once, where the T dot rating should be 8. Don't ask me why I took 8. You can take 9, you can take 10. So such tuple should exist in Sailor table, then only this where condition will be true. Correct? So for non-emptiness, at least one time this where condition is should be true. That is what? That is necessary, right? So that necessary thing we are seeing. So you tell me, whenever you have such sailor whose rating greater than our sailor rating, then only this where will become true and this result will become non-empty and exists of non-empty true. So this is a connection. So we print Raju. Now I realize that Raju is printed only if Raju's, there is a rating which is better than Raju's rating. Correct? Like 8, otherwise 9 or 10. At least one such rating should exist. That means what? Raju is definitely not highest. Correct? For highest rating, it will not happen. Example, why highest rating will not be printed? We'll see. 2, Rani, 10. Let's say 10 is the highest rating and Rani has that. Then when you are evaluating for Rani, what happens is Rani's rating 10 will be substituted here. Since no one's rating is greater than 10, this where condition will be every time will be evaluated to false, false, false. Then this query's result I am talking about will become empty. So exist of empty is false. So that because of that connection, Rani will not be printed. Correct? Because while evaluating for Rani, exists of empty is what? False. Then where condition is evaluated to false for Rani and Rani will not be printed. So finally, who are all printed? The people whose rating is not highest. That's it. Now we'll see when there are multiple levels of nestedness, how to evaluate that query. So when there are a lot of nested queries, so the query's evaluation will become complex. But still you should be able to answer it, because in the exam they can give you multiple, like the 2 levels of nested queries. Example, you see here outer query and that there is a nested query. In this nested query again one more nested query. So when you have this kind of model, how to evaluate it? So what we do is, first of all we start from top and we evaluate it. So the blind model is step number 1 and step number 2 and step number 3. Take every sailor, evaluate where condition, and if where condition is evaluated to true, print the corresponding tuple. So easy. But here there is a very complex query to be evaluated. Based on that only we are going to decide whether a tuple is printed or not. Imagine that, let's say the first tuple of the sailors is Raju. Okay, this person. Now the question is, Raju's ID is printed or not? It depends on the query evaluation. So what I do is, I just execute this query for Raju and I understand it. In the same way I can relate it to other tuples. Like same way we can understand it about Rani, Rakesh, everything. That's why the beauty and very important thing in this problem is, when this Raju will be printed is a question first of all. So what we do is, when this query is evaluated for the first tuple of sailors, then this where condition will be evaluated, right? So where exists of dash is true, non-empty. So finally, non-empty should be the important thing. To get non-empty result here, what should happen we will see. But Raju will be printed only if this result is non-empty. For simplicity, what I do is, to understand things easily, let's erase the outer query table. So then how you answer it? So we know that now we have Raju in the first outer query. So the question is, when Raju will be printed? Raju will be printed only if, when you substitute Raju's variable here, which is nothing but s.sid, Yesterday SID for Raju was 1. Okay. Now this query's result is non-empty. In the same way, we can understand about other tuples like other sailors. First focus on the first sailor, Raju. Target is non-empty result because there was exist operator, exist of non-empty is true. So question is reduced to when this query's result will be non-empty. Which query? This query. Select star from boards where exists. So boards means what? Lot of boards, right? 001, 002, 003. So for every board tuple we have to evaluate this query. Okay. So my target is simply non-empty. This non-empty result depends on this where condition. I can imagine it like where is a factory. So this where condition is producing tuples. So that factory should produce non-empty result. For that, this where condition should be evaluated to true at least once. At least once means when you substitute B1, because in this query we are iterating over all the boards, right? That means for every board tuple, when you substitute B1 or B2 or B3 or B4, at least one time where should be evaluated to true. So why? Example, let's say when you substituted either like B3, then this where condition is, that means you are substituting here B3, then where condition is evaluated to true. Then what happens? So this will become true. Here you get non-empty result. Very simple, right? At least one tuple you get here. So that's it. Now, sir, what if B3, when I substituted, if the result is empty here, then what happens? I will tell you. Exists of empty will become false. Then this where condition will be evaluated to false. It doesn't mean that so you get an empty result. Why? If B3 is substituted, if you this where condition is false, it doesn't mean that always where condition is false. Maybe when you substituted B1, where condition may become true, correct? Maybe when you substituted B2, this where condition may become true. So finally problem is reduced to to get non-empty result here, this where condition should be evaluated to true at least one time, either that is for B1 or B2 or B3 or B4. Sir, then how to understand it? Simple. Focus on B1 tuple. Ask yourself, because B1 is a variable, right? That means so it is not a particular tuple, so it is one of the random tuple. Focus on such random tuple and ask yourself, let's say if I substitute B1 here, then where condition is evaluated to true, let's say, then in what scenario it will happen, we will see. Okay, my assumption, let's say when I substitute B1 here, then this where condition is going to be evaluated to true. Such a way I am planning. Then for that, where exists of dash is true, non-empty. Here you should get non-empty result. And which variable we have to substitute? First tuple B1, correct? So B dot BID, let's say B1. B1 means what? 001 boat. Okay, now read this query. Target is you should get non-empty result. Now let me go back. Exists of non-empty is true. Then where condition will be evaluated to true on behalf of B1. Then we will be happy because you get non-empty result here. Okay. Now for that I am taking B1. So read it. Select star from reserves R where R dot BID equal to 001 and R dot SID equal to 1. So to get non-empty result, again same story. To get non-empty result here, this is the factory. This where is going to produce the tuples. To get non-empty result, this where condition should be evaluated to true at least once. That is enough for me. To get at least one time where condition true, I am just focusing directly on this one. R dot BID should be equal to, this is your reservations. In reservations, there should be R dot BID, that should be 001. So if R dot BID 001, just imagine, then R dot SID 1, such tuple, let's say exist, then automatically this where condition will be true at least one time. So this result will become non-empty. That is what I want. If this is non-empty, exists of non-empty will become true and this where condition will be evaluated to true at least once. I don't know about other cases, but at least once it will be true. Then that is enough for to become this entire query's result non-empty. So what if when you substitute B1, this result is not empty? So to get non-empty result here, that board should be reserved by 1. What if 1 never reserves it? Then we are sorry, because you get here empty result, correct? Always this query will give empty result if 1 is 1 never reserves 001, right? There will not be any reservation entry like this. Sir, what if there is no reservation entry like 1001? Then this condition, where condition, cannot be true at any time. So always this where will become false. Then you get empty result here, because this is the factory, I can say. This where is going to produce the tuples. So if this where condition is always false, then you get empty result. Then here exists of empty will become false. Then b1 tuple will be rejected on which this query. So still we are not evaluating the bigger query, first query. I am talking about this query. I want here non-empty result. Don't stop here. Some students stop here and say that, sir, I got wrong mark here. B1 gave us, that means where condition is evaluated to false for B1. So what to do? We should try for B2. If B2 when you substitute here, then again where condition becomes true, let's say, then automatically what happens? So this query's result will become non-empty, because this query's result depends on all the processing of all the boards: process B1, process B2, process B3, process B4. Okay, after that everything is, let's say, rejected like this. When you substitute B1, then B2, B3, B4, every time you are getting here empty result, let's say, then this where always gives false answer, because exists of empty is false. Every time if you get empty result here, whenever you substituted B1 or B2 or B3 or B4, then I say that all these tuples will be rejected here through this where condition. Then you get here empty result. Then what is the reason? Think about it. To get here empty result, hamesha where condition should be false, right? So every time where condition is false, then B1, B2, B3, B4, all these boards, nothing should be resolved by 1. Then only it happens. See the example, 1 does not resolve B1. Then when you substitute B1, this will become empty. Exists of empty will become false. Then where condition will become false. Then this tuple is rejected while iterating over boards. Then after that this tuple will be rejected. So every tuple will be rejected. So but I want at least one time this where condition true. Why? Then only I get non-empty result. For that, out of all these boards, at least one board should be resolved by 1. Correct? So finally I realized that to get non-empty result, at least one board should be resolved by Raju. Understand? So always my suggestion is, when you have multiple levels of nestedness, erase one nestedness. That means remove the topmost query. Now see only this query. So this query's result depends on non-emptiness. That means this query's output I want non-empty. Then only I get Raju will be printed. To get non-empty result, this where condition, because we are going to run this query for every board B1, B2, B3, B4, that you should understand. I am going to run this query for B1 first, then B2, then B3, then B4 at least one time. If when I substituted B1 or B2 or B3, if this where condition is evaluated true, then what happens? Here you get one tuple, right? To get the tuple in this query, this I am talking about boards. So when you substitute B1 or B2 or B3 or B4, this query, that means this where condition should be evaluated to true. That is the starting point. Finally we realize that this where condition should be true at least once. That is very important point in the entire summary. To get where condition to true, one tuple, either B1 or B2 or B3 or B4 can do that, correct? Because we are evaluating this where condition for B1, after that B2, after that B3, after that B4. At least one time this where condition should be true. I am just imagining that, let's say for B3 that where condition is becoming true. Let's say in what scenario it happens. At that time you have to substitute B3 here, then 003. Here you should get non-empty result, because exists of non-empty is what? True. To get non-empty result, that board 003 should be resolved by 1. Such tuple you should have in reservations. Example, really 003 is resolved by 1. Then this result will be non-empty. Exists of non-empty will become true. That means for B3 tuple, this query is giving, for B3 tuple, this where condition is becoming true. then this tuple will be printed on this query. Sir, what about other tuples? I don't know, but at least B3 will be printed. When B3 is printed here, you get non-empty result. So finally, to get non-empty result, either B1 or B2 or B3 or B4, at least one of them should be printed. They will be printed only when this where condition is evaluated to true for them. But where is evaluated to true when this result is non-empty. To get non-empty result, that substituted boat should be reserved by 1. Finally, one should reserve at least one boat, then you get non-empty result. In that way, so using the logic, we should understand the queries. That will be the best idea. If you practice this thing, then you can master it. Take some 4 or 5 examples and try to evaluate them using this conceptual idea. Then automatically, you can master it and you can solve any question. So I will be teaching you next problem where I modify exists to not exist, and we'll see what happens. Okay, I have changed this exist operator to not exist operator. Then what will be the output of this query? We will see. Same kind of query. So let's begin here. We know that we run this query for every sailor, correct? So first only focus on the first sailor. If you understand for first sailor, then you can understand for others, correct? So this is, let's say, one Raju. The problem is reduced to whether Raju's ID is printed or not. Raju's ID will be printed only when this where condition is evaluated to true, but where not exists of dash is true, not exists of empty is true. That's why finally my target is I should get empty here. So we can erase this entire part now, right? So that we can have a smaller query. Target is we should get here empty result. What is this query? Read first from scratch. Select start from boards, take every board and evaluate this where condition, but you should get empty result. This is the operator, otherwise I can say where class, which is going to generate the tuples, correct? Where is going to generate the tuples, but to get empty result, where should be always false. Remember it. That is what one important observation. So finally this where condition should be evaluated to false every time. If example every time where is false, then nothing will be printed in this query's output, then result will be empty. That is what my target. Assume that let's say we have 3 boards B1, B2, B3. To evaluate this query, we are going to substitute board number 1 first, then board number 2, then board number 3. But when you substitute B1, on behalf of B1 where condition will be evaluated, on behalf of B2 where condition will be evaluated, on behalf of B3 this where condition will be evaluated, correct? That is what the meaning of taking running this query for every board, correct? Now but where condition should be always false. Let's focus on B1. So to have always false result, for B1 also result should be false. For that exists of dash is false, exists of empty is false. That's why here target is empty result, right? Empty. So exists of empty is false, then only where condition will become true. Exists of empty will become false, then only where condition will become false. My target become finally when I substitute B1. So B dot BAD, let's say B1. Board number 1 is nothing but let's say 001. Let me substitute. And S dot SID 1. What is S dot SID 1, right? Because we were executing for first sailor tuple. Then in the first sailor S dot SID, let's say 1. Now read this query. Select star from reserves where R dot BID 001 and R dot SID 1. Really there is a reservation entry with boat ID 001 and SID 1. Then really such tuple exists in the reservation. Then this query's result will become non-empty, correct? Because where condition will be at least one time it will be evaluated to true. But my target is what? I want to get empty result. To get empty result, so this kind of tuple should not exist. If this kind of tuple exists, this result will be non-empty. Very simple. So to get empty result, this kind of tuple should not exist. For that, one never in the reservations, one should not reserve 001. Then finally, this query's result will become empty and exists of empty will become false. Then on behalf of B1 when you executed, this query's where condition become false. But our target is what? Empty result. To get empty result here, every time this where should be false for b1, for b2, for b3. Now already you know the story about b1. When you substituted b1, this where condition becomes false only if b1 is not resolved by 1. If b2 is also not resolved by 1, then what happens we'll see. One more time explaining. So because we are running this query for every boat, we execute this query for b2 also. When you substitute b2, let's say that boat is 002, then this query will be evaluated. If really 1 does not resolve 002, then this query's result will become empty. Exists of empty will become false. Then this where condition will become false. Our target is this where should be always false for b1, b2, b3. For that neither b1 nor b2 nor b3 nothing should be resolved by 1. Then only it will happen. Then only you get here empty result. Correct? Then only we are going to print Raju's SID. So finally this Raju, which is matter of discussion now. So Raju will be printed only if when you substituted that ID here, Raju's ID, that one should not reserve B1, should not reserve B2, should not reserve B3. That is a story. Then only here you get empty result. So let me summarize. Initially to get empty result here, you thought this where condition should be always false. To get where condition false for B1, B1 should not be resolved by 1. To get false condition for B2, that means where condition on B2. So B2 should not be resolved by 1, then only it will happen. In that way, no boat should be resolved by 1. Then only this where condition will be always false. That is what my target, always false, then you get empty result. Understand? So now we'll modify the query. So here this query's output is, it prints all the Raju kind of people. Let me generalize it. I took only one tuple, but I can understand about others also. It's not only about Raju, anyone who does not reserve any boat. If one does not reserve any boat like B1, B2, B3, then such person will be printed. It prints all the people who have not reserved any boat. Understand? So the last variation is, so we are using not exist operator here, again not exist here. Okay. So we already used not exist here, right? Now same story. We have Raju. Should we print Raju or not? For that, Raju's SID will be printed here. Correct? That means substituted here. Then we run this query. So not exists of dash is true, non-empty. Sorry, not exists of empty is true. Correct? So here again my target is I should get empty result. Then I erase this query so that query will be easy for me. So my target is empty result here. To get empty result, it is depending on this where class. So where condition should be always false. Then only you get empty result. So we are running this query, select star from boats B where not exists, that one for every boat. Correct? So that's why we execute this query for B1, then B2, B3, where B1, B2, B3 represent 3 tuples of boat table. When you substitute B1, we are going to substitute B1 first here, after that B2, after that B3. Every time this where condition should be evaluated to false. Don't ask me why. The reason is this where is always false, then only you get empty result here. Correct? Now let me substitute B1 here. Target is what? Where condition should be false for B1. So for B1, where condition should be false. Let's try for that. When it will happen? Not exists of dash is false because my target is where condition false. This where. For that, where not exists of dash is false, non-empty. So my problem is reduced to, when I substitute B1 here, B.BAD, let's say 001. This entire story is about when I substitute B1 here, that is 001. Target is what? Where condition false. This where condition is false only if this result table, this table is non-empty. Okay, let me write it first. Not exists of non-empty is false. Then B1 will be rejected. But I want to get B1 rejected, B2 get rejected, B3 get rejected. Then only I get here empty. That's a separate story. First of all, focus on this one. Finally, B1 tuple should get rejected. For that, this where should be false. For that, this result should be non-empty. Now focus on this final query. Target non-empty. Select start from reservations where r.bid is 001 and r.sid 1. this should be non-empty. For that, at least one time this where condition should be true, correct? Then only you get non-empty result. Ask yourself, when this where condition will be true at least one time? For that, there should be reservations. Imagine this situation. There is a reservation such a way that r dot bid is 001, okay, and r dot sid is 1. If this kind of reservation exists, what does it mean semantically? That means SID 1, who is 1? Our Raju. Raju reserves really 001, then only it happens. So 001 is nothing but boat number 1. If that boat number 1 is reserved by Raju, then this where condition will be true at least once, this where. Then you get here non-empty result. Then not exist of non-empty will become false. Then B1 will be rejected. Is it enough? No. B2 also should get rejected. B3 also should get rejected by this where condition. For that, you tell me when B1 is rejected. To get B1 rejected, B1 should be reserved by Raju. To also get B2 rejected, B2 also should be reserved by Raju. If B2 is reserved by Raju, what happens? This result will become non-empty. Then not exist of not empty will become false. Then B2 will be rejected. That's why if you understand about one tuple, you can understand about all other tuples. Target is what? Empty. For that, B1 should be rejected, B2 should be rejected, B3 should be rejected. You understand the story behind, when B1 will be rejected. For that, B1 should be reserved by Raju. If B2 also reserved by Raju, B3 also reserved by Raju, let's say, then all these B1, B2, B3 will be rejected. Then here every time where will become false. Then you get empty result here. There was a not exist operator here, correct? Not exist of empty will become true. Then Raju will be printed. Now ask yourself, when Raju will be printed? Raju will be printed only when all the boards are rejected by him. To get Raju will reject them only. That means this B1, B2, B3 when we substitute them, they should be reserved by Raju. If they are reserved by Raju, then only B1, B2, B3 will be rejected by this where condition. Correct or not? Just now we have seen. So finally, if Raju reserves all the boards B1, B2, B3, then this every time this query's result will become non-empty, and not exist of non-empty will become false, and such tuples all that boards will be rejected. If all these boards are get rejected, then you get empty result here. So that means Raju reserved all the boards, then only it happens. So finally, is it about only Raju? No. The story was like that. Select s.sid. I am writing the query back. Select s.sid from sailors. It's not only about Raju. It was about all the sailors. There are a lot of sailors. Let's say S1, S2, S3. So far, we evaluated this query for sailor number 1, who is Raju. And Raju will be printed only if Raju reserves all the boards. Similarly, the next person is Rani. This Rani is also will be printed only if Rani reserves all the boards, because same story will be applicable for Rani also. The way Raju is printed, in the same way Rani also will be printed. Finally, a person will be printed if he reserves all the boards. Okay.